The opinions expressed on the following audio program are solely those of the host and the guests. Burner Podcast is an independently produced, not-for-profit show and is not associated with the Burning Man organization or its subsidiaries. The views expressed are not representative of the entire Burning Man community and are presented here for entertainment purposes only. In short, calm the fuck down. It's just a podcast.
All right, it's episode number 69, and it is 305 days till the man burns as of this recording. 69. I gotta tell you, I'm fucking totally over Halloween. I'm over it. Now, the last thing that I want to do is dump on your parade, or rain on your parade, or whatever the phrase is. Point is, I'm sure you have a really great parade, and I don't want to fuck that shit up because I do love parades. I will champion your right to march in them and dance in them or just be a drunken mess right next to them like my high school friends are when San Diego Pride is happening and they don't even remember seeing me when I ran into them and they were already a sloppy mess at goddamn 10 in the morning. Point is, I love that Halloween exists. I love that I know so many people that go all out for it. I love the creativity and the costumes. I love the excitement. Halloween's great. I just realized after all the fuss this year that I experienced more stress trying to figure out my costume than any actual fun I had on any of the nights. I don't know. I can't think of the last time I attended a Halloween party and I had a blast because it was a Halloween party, if that makes sense. So I feel this pressure to be really good at coming up with something creative because I'm an artist and I hang out with burners. So there's like costumes all the time. Then add to that the physical anxiety I feel being in an outfit that's not mine. I'm 6'5". I'm often in like the public eye for things. And I have this anxiety about already feeling like I get like a lot of undue attention. Like I can't cut in lines. I can't hide in the back of a room. I can't get away with that shit. And then add to that this crazy costume that just like piles on my like introvert anxiety and it just shoots it all through the roof. So I love Halloween. I love seeing all of you coming up with the brilliant shit that you come up with. I'm just gonna hide next year when Halloween comes around. I'm super glad it's over. You know who does Halloween, like who does it right, is Troy Swanson from the last episode of this show entitled Breakfast at Troyfini's. The Alphabet Club NGO, of which Troy is the founder, throws the most epic Halloween party in Amsterdam to raise money for children's education programs around the world. So if you want to learn all about that, you should go back to episode 68 to hear that story. But let's move on from Halloween. Thank God. Like the rest of the world. We're about to start like today's interview, but afterwards, stay tuned for a new segment we're experimenting with. Instead of just saying goodbye, we're going to take you out with some music. So you get to hear me blab, blah, 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 and then hear someone way smarter than me tell you a bunch of cool shit while I look for like opportunities to make dick jokes. And then you're going to hear an hour of an amazing deep house set. So the show can feel like a little mini burn in your ear. Taken out of context, mini burn in your ear sounds like some weird infection you get from attending an experimental sex party. But they're not always going to be deep house. It's just today's happens to be deep house. If we continue this format, you know, it just happens to be, and you'll find out why in just a second. The set you're going to hear is going to be a sunrise set from Playground on Friday morning. I'm pretty sure it's Friday morning. It's all a little bit of a blur. From Burning Man 2017. It's from Playground. Playground is, of course, Carl Cox's camp on the 2 o'clock side. The Burner podcast and Alkaline team got to camp with Perky Parts last year, which villaged with Playground. So we have a little bit of a connection there. And the that you're going to be hearing today is mixed by Igor Meriwan, all the way from Ibiza, España. I tried to do the little list thing. España. I ended up at Playground right as the sun was about to rise, and Igor was playing some really beautiful music. There weren't a whole lot of people there, and I was just feeling the music so deeply. So I was like right in the middle of the dance floor, just floating on a cloud. And it was just really my favorite memory of the event. And in the distance, the sun starts to rise and the sky explodes in multiple cascades of orange and yellow and magenta. And it is just fucking breathtaking. And I'm hearing this absolutely perfect set from this amazing sound system. And every once in a while, I turn back and I make eye contact with Igor. And he has this massive smile on his face. And he spreads his arms towards me and says, "For you, I do this all for you." And it was just so perfect. Like I said, just absolutely my favorite memory of this year. So we're going to play the first hour of that set because it's like a 3.5 hour set, I think. And it's gonna play after the interview on today's episode, and that's why the runtime on this looks a little bit longer than usual. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you like it. Should we keep doing it? Are you like, oh my god, I don't fucking want to hear any more deep house? You know, I don't know. I don't know how to help you with that. I mean, we're going to play different kinds of music if we do continue this tradition. But that's the thing to stick around for at the end. But let's get into today's interview, finally, after I've blabbed enough about other things. Neuroscientist Caitlin Thompson is the founder of EntheoZen. I always wonder if I'm pronouncing that right. A nutritional supplement company inspired by her own immunity challenges and our festival culture. And the culture in general that we run in. I've been wanting to do an episode for a while now about what a lot of us are doing to our brains, and finally got the opportunity to bring someone in who can give some hard input about the subject. Hard input. So that's what my initial interest was when we scheduled this interview, to chat about Molly and LSD and serotonin, and we're going to get into that for sure. There's just almost no way to avoid that. And as always, I'm usually kind of like weaving the conversation around the guest's own life story, so you get to know them and how they ended up in the burner community, while I kind of like chip away at the topic that we're kind of trying to focus on. And as always, the conversation decides where it wants to go. And this is a major contributing factor as to why I don't pre-prep too many questions too much. I'm trusting that a certain message wants to come through from this energy exchange between myself and the guest, guests, or all the guests. I'm just kind of trusting that there's a message that's supposed to come through from there, and we're recording it, and I'm just kind of trying my best to facilitate that. So in today's interview, we'll start with Caitlin's discovery of psychedelics while we get into some of the neuroscience of what's happening in our brains, and then like we learn about her college life, and there's some fun stories there. And when I say we get into it, what I really mean is Caitlin is saying things that are way over my head while I'm nodding politely and trying to sound like I have some grasp of what she's saying. Part of that was also due to the fact that I coincidentally had gone kind of hard over the weekend, so my brain was kind of mush. But Caitlin has an amazing presence and is articulate as fuck and is truly just an extraordinary young woman. So thank God I got to kind of hit record and sit back and just let her riff. And she's somebody that you'll want to listen to. Then the conversation goes further and further in the direction of not just brains, but the impact of psychedelics on the human body and the immune system. Caitlin has been battling an immunity disorder, among other things, which of course leads us to talking about how the earth is doing the same thing, and we are God, and perhaps the infinite living consciousness in all things is experiencing the same. Oh, Christ. I'm gonna stop right there and just like let you hear it on your own, because as executive producer Meg liked to point out, we're gonna at some point go off the rails on pretty much every single episode. So you won't be able to see it, obviously, but see if you can spot the part in the conversation towards the end when I like getting legit choked up. Today's episode is entitled Fractals and Microbiomes. Took me a while to come up with that one. That was a tough one. I go by Mr. Arash, even though nobody calls me Mr. Welcome to Burner Podcast.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the life. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rain. The first thing I met was the flowers, the balls, and the sky with no clouds.
because it's the funny thing is, I've actually had like a couple of different listeners like comment on Instagram and like different social media posts about like, oh, is that the cat that we hear in the background of recordings?
Oh, that's so funny.
Because they eat at 7 p.m. And I was just having this conversation with my roommate Brendan about how Mayad has like a very specific meow for when he's hungry. It's like this meow. It's like this long meow, right? Aww. And like he starts doing it the minute any of us get home at like 6:15. And we're like, so you're just being an asshole. You know you're not going to eat till 7 p.m. anyway. All the complaining is not going to get you fed.
Right.
I guess but it also got me thinking about like at the end of the day, he's just like a living creature that's looking for his,
right,
meal like next serotonin hit.
Yeah, right.
So,
yeah. Plus, cats are a foundational part of internet content.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, this is important.
Yeah.
It's almost like we're super in vogue with like everything that's happening on the internet on this show by having cats in the background.
Yeah, I feel like we're like cultured,
Yeah.
Totally.
So it is actually quite fitting that we are recording this interview today because it is a very rare Monday that I am personally feeling like the weekend really kicked my ass.
Oh.
So, definitely a topic of interest for so many people in the community. Not everybody, of course, like that's been what a lot of this show has been about, but I want to kind of like get to know you and like some of your background and how you ended up getting into the work that you got into, and kind of find out like where your interest in this subject began. Like, is it chicken or the egg kind of situation? Like, were you into the neurosciences before you discovered festival culture, or did you get into festival culture and then neuroscience was like, oh, I want to learn more about what people are doing to themselves out of these events? Allegedly.
I think it was a little bit of both. Like you said, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I'm not really sure. Mm-hmm. I always had an interest in biology and nature as a kid. And then, entering college, I chose biology as my major. And that was also coincidentally when I started kind of exploring with mind-altering substances. And so they really were parallel paths in conjunction with each other. And I would say that actually, my growth and my healing from my psychedelic experiences while I was in college studying, neurobiology was actually fueling my motivation to get through my degree. Because while the content has always been interesting, it's a freaking hard degree to get. I didn't realize actually that the only about 30% of people that enter a biology degree actually finish with that degree. And so I thought I was just like a mediocre student, but then I felt better when I figured out I was actually like, on the lower end of the higher end.
Yeah. So the standard is just low enough.
Right. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm not like totally bottom of the barrel. Because I was an okay student. And like, I was having a very rich experience. I was going to Burning Man. I was traveling to Peru and drinking ayahuasca, all as a full-time student. And so, yeah, I would say, studying science gave me more tools to go, look deeper at what these psychedelic medicines can do and how they're actually working in our bodies and in our consciousness. And there were also some health factors that motivated me to engage more in the scientific literature because at the time I didn't quite understand what was going on with my health condition, but I knew that psychedelics made me feel better and they made me feel happier and more balanced.
Okay, so let's go. What is your health condition?
So I've been kind of recovering from a chronic illness for, I guess recovering the last few years, but I've had it my whole life and I didn't know because the symptoms that I had, people were just kind of brushing off and telling me I was normal. I always had chronic fatigue, depression and anxiety were pretty common, joint pain, skin issues, what I would call malabsorption. I was just an eating machine. Nothing ever stuck to me. It was just going right through me. And I had all these nutritional deficiencies because my body really wasn't absorbing anything.
How long have you had this?
Since as long as I can remember, really. As long as I was born.
And you're feeling better now as a result of?
A lot of things. Yeah. Okay. I have worked pretty diligently over the last few years to address this. And so I have this kind of weird trifecta of like neuroscience and psychedelics and holistic health and nutrition. So do you is there a diagnosis for what it is that the health issue that you have? Yeah, so there's a lot of different words that doctors could, slap together, but really it was like a complete immune dysfunction in the body, chronic inflammation. But I had, Lyme disease, PTSD, some gut and central nervous system infections like Klebsiella pneumoniae, Enterobacter, cloaca, and food sensitivities, and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, candida, blah blah blah. There's all sorts of words for it, but really it was that my body was chronically inflamed and it was completely out of balance. And you'd been this way since as far back as you can remember. Yeah, and it got worse after I lived in a moldy house for almost 5 years. That's when the symptoms started just getting really bad. And how old were you? I lived in that house from age 21 to 25. Okay. So around the time you were in college, right? Exactly. Okay. Yeah, and college on its own is stressful and exhausting. And so listeners can't see this, but my ad is now crawling all over Caitlin. It's awesome. Because, by the way, we've definitely noticed this. Like, you're like the third female guest that we've had. Like, it's as soon as she's like female guests, like we're sitting here on the couch, starts coming over and crawling all over. Pussy likes pussy. There you go. So you've been feeling this way pretty much as far back as you can remember. It would be logical to assume that may have been a motivating factor for your interest in biology, learning more about that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the beginning, it was just a curiosity about life. You know, that is what biology is the study of life. Right. But when I started to kind of realize that something was actually wrong with me physically, I really was motivated to get to the bottom of it and figure out what the root cause was and how I could heal it naturally. And that's when I really started just diving down the rabbit hole of the scientific literature on, the relationship in college. And the relationship between nutrients and depression, anxiety, and psychiatric conditions. And, how psychedelics could help people with depression and anxiety. Why was your motivation... I gotta get a photo of this. Why was your motivation to do it holistically rather than through Western medicine, for lack of a better description? My mom had been on antidepressants for 25 years, and I guess I wasn't really convinced that they were going to be effective. And so I, from personal experience, had seen that they were quite good at numbing people and numbing their pain, but that didn't resonate with me. Like, I wanted to know why my physiology was pulling me in this sort of imbalanced state, because I was able to recognize that my life was really happy and good, and I was truly a happy person, but something in my physiology was off. And how psychedelics kind of tied into this was, in my college days, I was using LSD and mushrooms and things like that quite regularly, and staying pretty happy and balanced, and actually medicating. Now I realized I was medicating. And then when I got kind of into the harder classes like organic chemistry and biochemistry and stuff of that sort, I took a little step back from partying to really buckle down on school. And that means I was not using LSD as much. And I found, interestingly enough, around the 7th to 8th week mark after my last LSD experience, I was starting to chemically unravel, become increasingly agitated, depressed, anxious, kind of foggy, and just irritable. Right. And finally, after like 3 or 4 times of this happening, I was able to pinpoint it. I'm like, wow, when I go a certain amount of time without using a psychedelic, I kind of spiral out of control really fast. And that's when I got really interested in the therapeutic potential of psychedelics. And that also kind of fueled my interest in studying them and trying to understand the pathology of depression and how psychedelics might be related to that neurochemically.
So let me go back to that. What was your first psychedelic experience?
My first psychedelic experience. Well, I started with MDMA, which is not like a true classical psychedelic, but I kind of got in the rave scene. It was really heart-opening. It connected me to community and just the idea that, oh, maybe drugs actually aren't these awful things that I've been told my whole life. Then I think I started exploring with LSD, and then mushrooms, and then DMT.
Do you remember your first LSD trip?
I do. It was quite intense. Balboa Park. It's a good place.
That is a good place.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's a good trip place.
A lot of detail in like the architecture and the walls and.
Yeah. It was really, really intense. It just so happened that I got some like insanely potent acid for my first experience.
Were you alone? Were you with friends?
I was with friends. Yeah, definitely wasn't alone. I had 2 other friends with me.
And so you guys all dropped at Balboa Park, or you drop and then go to Balboa Park?
Oh, we dropped there.
Okay.
Yeah, once we were there, and then we had some friends pick us up later and, hang out with us a little bit because we didn't want to drive, of course.
Of course. You were like 20, 21 at this point?
I was, I think, 19.
19, okay.
Yeah.
And do you remember sort of like what the biggest revelation for you was from that very first trip?
Ooh, I don't think I had quite processed all the downloads yet, but I knew that I had stumbled upon something really interesting.
Right.
That's all I can say for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so at that point you decided there was something about the energy of that experience felt right and you started doing it regularly.
Yeah, I actually, at this point I was still kind of deep in the rave scene, but the MDMA was starting to really take a toll on my body and my brain. Yeah. And so I started kind of substituting LSD at raves, which is a totally different experience. For one, you remember everything, which is really nice. But
because you were doing MDMA like regularly, weekly at that time?
Not weekly. Like I was doing it probably every month, but then it started to get closer to every 3 weeks, and then like, oh, I'll just make an exception every 2 weeks. And then it got to the point where I'm like, this is clearly not sustainable. And my brain wasn't recovering. I was struggling with depression afterwards, and just, it wasn't healthy. So LSD was way more sustainable. I could literally do it every weekend and party as much as I want, and I felt good afterwards.
Right. Because the description that I've given, and tell me if this at all sounds not like complete bullshit to you, is that with like MDMA, well, you know what? The neuroscientist can explain sort of what's happening with the brain there. Yeah, I feel like with MDMA, like it's basically going to fill up and unleash, all the serotonin and dopamine that experience. So you could be a miserable bastard and still have an amazing time.
Sure.
With the right amount of buildup in your brain. Whereas with LSD, the joy that you're experiencing, if you are experiencing a joyous trip, comes from that part of your personality who is interested in the experience and interested in learning and seeing things from a new angle. And if you're the kind of person who is not enjoying experiences like that normally, the LSD is just going to make you like even more miserable in that experience. Right.
Yeah. I find with psychedelics, they really kind of augment what is actually there. Mm-hmm. Whereas MDMA it's a wonderful medicine for certain things, but I feel like it's a bit of a fake euphoria. It's like just push the happy button, which can be really helpful and therapeutic. But LSD, I feel like really just, like I said, augments the underlying emotion that's actually present.
So, side note, can you describe what the differences are and what's happening in the brain with MDMA? And
sure, LSD? Yeah. So pharmacologically, they both interact with the serotonergic system, so the serotonin receptors in the brain, but in different ways. And that's why they have different effects, and you can kind of bounce back from psychedelics faster than with MDMA. So MDMA actually causes the release of your body's own supply of serotonin. It dumps about 80% right into the synaptic cleft and binds to receptors and creates this flooding effect of serotonin, resulting in euphoria. Whereas something like LSD and psilocybin, for example, they actually bind to the serotonin receptors in a similar fashion to serotonin. So the difference there is that when you take MDMA, you're actually depleting your body's own supply of something, and it takes a while for your body to make the serotonin back. It's a process, and so you actually are, kind of like spending a resource, and you have to reestablish those building blocks to make more of that resource. Whereas LSD or psilocybin, they're kind of tickling the receptor and a bit of, tricking the body into thinking that it's having serotonin binding. And then once the receptor lets go of the molecule of the drug, then it's fine, and you still have all of your supply of serotonin left.
Right. What is serotonin responsible for? What does it do for us?
A lot of things. So, of course, it is really important for regulating mood and sleep and appetite. But even deeper than that, they're finding it's really crucial for a lot of immune responses and inflammatory processes in the body. So one thing I've been really interested in lately, and I've been doing some lectures and writing a paper on it and stuff, is actually looking at psychedelics as a potential novel approach to autoimmune conditions or chronic inflammatory conditions. Because, yeah, they're great for mood and depression and addiction. We know that, but there's very little research looking at how they might actually be immune modulators. And there's an incredible amount of evidence suggesting that they could be implicated in other things like diabetes or chronic fatigue syndrome or Lyme disease or even eczema or whatever.
Right. So serotonin, wow, that's interesting. It almost feels like the more I learn about serotonin, about like the different chemicals the human body has, it feels like it's like, for lack of a better description, it's like the most important one that you need just to be able to navigate the world, to be able to get through life. I know for me, I noticed that it affects focus more than anything. And I noticed that if I have an experience a couple of days, like it takes a couple of days to kind of like get back into like the same mode that I would be. I have to kind of get back to working out more and making sure I'm eating healthy to make sure I'm producing more. And then, then Suicide Tuesday is no joke.
Yeah.
That builds up. What is happening in that period of time, in that like 48 hours to 72 hours after, let's say, you take ecstasy or MDMA substance? So,
there's the initial kind of flood where you're actually feeling the effects of the drug, and then, kind of wears off. But for, a good 2 days or so afterwards, your body is still kind of leaking serotonin, and it's also trying to cope with this new deficiency all of a sudden, and that can throw quite a bit of physiological processes out of balance. And some people, they've actually done rat studies. Some people will actually take Prozac at a certain point after their MDMA dose to terminate the MDMA, because the Prozac and the MDMA, they actually bind to the same protein in the neuron, the brain cell, and the Prozac has a higher affinity, so it actually outcompetes the MDMA. So what will happen is if you take the Prozac, it'll kick out the MDMA and actually terminate the process of your brain dumping the serotonin. And so they have seen in rat studies that can reduce some of the oxidative stress and the depletion and the damage that can occur after MDMA. Also, MDMA, because it is an amphetamine, technically it's very unique in that it acts on like the serotonin system, whereas most amphetamines are acting on the dopaminergic or the dopamine system. So dopamine oxidizes naturally into a metabolite that is a free radical compound, which free radicals cause oxidative damage or stress on neurons.
What does oxidative damage mean?
So, I mean, you know what a free radical is, right?
Well, let's explain it I know all of these things.
Gotcha.
But let's explain it for the listeners who don't know.
So a lot of people know, free radicals, they age you or whatever. So what that actually,
from the 90s.
Right. What that actually means is that there is like a lone electron. So electrons normally like to be in pairs, and when something is a free radical, it's got a single electron, and that's a highly unstable condition for a molecule to be in, and it wants to go and find an electron to steal so it's not lonely. And so what ends up happening is it causes this cascading of, events where, I'll just steal your electron, and then that one only has one electron, and it'll steal electron from someone else. And it goes on, kind of damaging tissues and rearranging electrons until an antioxidant that has an extra electron will come around and donate it, and then everybody's cool,
Okay.
So that can actually cause tissue damage, cellular damage. And dopamine, like I said, metabolizes into this free radical compound and oxidizes tissues and can potentially damage it if there is an excess of free radicals versus how many antioxidant molecules your body is making to balance it out. Okay. Right? So MDMA does have a downstream effect of releasing dopamine. Not quite the same as like methamphetamine, but it's part of, the pathway. And so some speculate that any of the neurotoxic effects of MDMA are actually from the downstream dopamine oxidizing effects.
But not from the initial, like, serotonin experience.
Right. But somehow that serotonin dumping is triggering dopamine release later down the road. It's kind of complicated, and I'm not actually like an expert in MDMA pharmacology, but I kind of know enough.
Right. This was, so you're experiencing you're having these questions as you're having like your first experiences, I imagine, when you're in college. And that's when you're getting into studying this stuff.
No, I think I did the drugs first, to be honest. I think I was like, wow, this is fun. Yeah. And then I got more curious about like, what's going on in my brain?
Tell me about some of the experiences that you're having when you're starting to learn about this stuff while you're actually doing the drugs. You said for a while you took some time off and you noticed that there was a change in your mood and your health.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to? Do you think that a lot of some of the physical health symptoms that you're having were being exacerbated by perhaps like depression and anxiety that you're feeling at that time, or there were more?
I think that I had this underlying chronic Lyme disease infection amongst other things, and it was putting a tremendous amount of stress on my body, and I was having the mold exposure too. So my immune system was like trying to hold the fort down, but it was completely exhausted, and my body was inflamed, and that inflamed my nervous system, which made me depressed. And so I think I had all that going on, but the psychedelics were mitigating the inflammation and the pain and the depression. And so I actually didn't have a clue that any of this was going on at all because I was effectively reducing my symptoms.
I see.
Yeah.
And it's like there's no matter what people get sick from, I've never seen a doctor not say, try to lower your stress. Because like stress pretty much makes everything worse, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like this vicious cycle that keeps happening. And even things as silly as like you'll see like cold sores all of a sudden like pop up when you're stressed out about things.
Yeah.
People get sick after the weekend because the immune system gets weaker, and then the stress makes the other thing worse.
Oh, yeah.
So what you were experiencing is that you're having these beautiful experiences and they were lowering your stress level, and then that was lowering some of the effects that were coming out from the Lyme disease, but then it backtracked with the...
Yeah, I mean, the emotional stress or the psychological stress was one facet of it. But like I said, there's some evidence that psychedelics are actually anti-inflammatory and immune modulating. And I mean, one of the reasons they're so amazing as potential therapeutic tools is that they're so multifaceted in how they can actually heal somebody. They can heal emotional trauma through this spiritual, mystical experience. They can lower your inflammation. They can kind of get your immune system under control that's attacking itself or whatever. Or they put you in a situation where you're having a very heartfelt, connected experience with a community in an environment where you're having fun. Those are all like really good things for you, you know?
Right. Can you explain what's happening in the body with inflammation?
Ooh, a little bit. I'm not like an immunologist or anything.
I'm certain most of our listeners are not.
Great.
Just so we have an idea of what we're referencing when we're talking about inflammation.
So I guess the process of inflammation, basically, it's actually your body's first line of defense to repair tissue and protect. So say you trip and cut your leg or whatever, and all of a sudden you have an injury, you have tissue that's been compromised, it's damaged, it's susceptible to bacteria coming in. Your body sends these molecules called cytokines to the area that has been damaged or compromised in an effort to clean up the damaged tissue and to create an environment that is inhospitable to infectious organisms from just, moving their way in. So when you like sprain your ankle or something, inflammation is actually a really normal, healthy part of the human experience. But what tends to happen is that the body can get a little over ambitious. And at a certain point, what's interesting is because we talked about free radicals earlier. So the process of inflammation happening in the body actually creates free radicals as byproducts. And then the free radicals can damage the tissue, and then the tissue sends out signals for more inflammatory molecules, and it's this vicious cycle of like oxidative stress and then inflammation, and that triggers more oxidative stress and that triggers more inflammation. And so that's why, for example, you can ice your ankle, and that disrupts this cycle of inflammation, which can escalate out of control. So when you take these like sort of anti-inflammatory herbs or medications, they reduce the inflammation. But if the root of the inflammation hasn't been removed, say it's a chronic infection, or say you are allergic to gluten or dairy or something, and you're just eating it all the time, you're going to continue to have chronic inflammation, because inflammation is really your body's response to a stressor or an assault. And so while it's part of the healing process maybe to reduce the inflammation, you really have to think it's a bit like shooting the messenger, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it hurts.
Yeah.
So like Wolverine of the X-Men is just really good at inflammation. That's how he keeps healing. Okay, and then so the research that you're referencing, psychedelics are doing what with the inflammatory process?
So this is where it's interesting, and actually I'm hoping soon to actually start a experimental project where we can publish research that is looking at inflammatory biomarkers as a result of psychedelic use or even immune modulation or whatever. But so far we just have a handful of studies that are kind of preliminary, that suggest that there are anti-inflammatory properties. For example, we've seen that like LSD can reduce something called TNF alpha, which is a pro-inflammatory cytokine. We've seen that it reduces a number of interleukin cytokines in human and rat studies.
What do those words mean?
They're just types of pro-inflammatory molecules.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then there's actually tons of literature looking at manipulation of the serotonin system, specifically through the 5-HT2A receptor. So that's the main kind of target that everybody's focused on, that psychedelics bind to. And so we know that activation of that receptor can reduce inflammation and modulate immune response and inflammatory processes. What we haven't proven yet, because there hasn't been a study conducted at this point, is that psychedelics binding to the 5-HT2A receptor will elicit an anti-inflammatory effect in human beings. So that's the part that we can't say for sure. There's a lot of evidence and like pieces of the puzzle that it seems highly likely that that's going on, because 1 + 1 = 2. But in science, you can't necessarily extrapolate that. You have to actually do a study and see, in this study, did that reduce inflammation in a human being?
That's interesting. Okay. So you were having these experiences in college, and like this is sort of where these ideas were coming to you that this may be the case. Where did you go to college, by the way?
San Diego State.
Okay. Hey, me too.
Awesome.
When you started to study this subject matter, what sort of response did you get? Were like people generally supportive? Was it still kind of like still a black sheep thing at the time?
Oh yeah. At that point, my parents hadn't quite been comfortable with the whole psychedelic thing. Like, I was pretty open with them, and I was pretty expressive because I felt like I was doing things for the right reason. And so I was quite public about it, and I was very open with my friends and family about my passion for psychedelics. And of course that raised a lot of concern for a lot of people, and they were like, oh my god, our child is obsessed with drugs, like what would you wrong, but over time I think they saw, one, I exposed them to the legitimacy of this as a science, and the works that MAPS is doing, and that there is therapeutic benefit and real scientific literature on this, and I'm not just like some completely crazy person. And also I got healthier, I got smarter, and like I was just on a track to being a competent person, which I think was their main concern, was that I was going to become like a total dysfunctional human being, drug addict or whatever.
That's what everybody's biggest fear is.
Yeah, and I do feel like the last few years it's become more of a public the exposure has increased a lot to the public with all these articles and news reports and videos and the internet. People are actually open to the idea that, maybe psychedelics could be medicines and they're not just these horribly addictive, detrimental substances.
No, it's caught on like wildfire. I feel that it's probably because we have more people from our generation getting into positions of power. In media and in corporations, and you're getting, like somebody like Steve Jobs describing that some of the most important experiences he ever had have been on LSD. I mean, there's half the people that run a big chunk of the world through like Silicon Valley are at Burning Man every year. Yeah. So that community, this community now has a stronger voice than it ever has. Yeah. But I wonder, like, what was your academic community like at that time? Were your professors supportive?
It's funny. So I had this neurobiology professor, and he was really a cool guy. And like he struck me as this like kind of like burnout surfer dude that somehow got like a PhD in biology and was, working at SDSU. And I really felt a connection to him. And I had this idea for an experiment that I wanted to do. I had a hunch that people that had regular psychedelic use could actually hear higher frequencies. And based on a little experiment that had gone on in my physics class, and I noticed me and the girl with the mushroom necklace in the class could hear the higher frequencies that no one else could hear. And so I started to wonder if there was something to that. So I wrote up... Did you
just assume that girl with the mushroom necklace was doing mushrooms?
I assume so. Okay, I mean, that's a pretty fair assumption,
I don't know. Maybe she's a fan of Super Mario Brothers.
I don't know. She looked pretty like 420 friendly, She had that vibe. So anyways, I wrote up this experimental design, and I set up a meeting with this professor, and I went into his office and I said, hey,
what is the frequency that you're referencing though? Like which?
I don't recall. Okay. Yeah, it was just so long.
Is it like the sound that the TV makes when you turn off the cable box, but you leave the TV on, and people think that the TV's off, but it's on? I
don't know. I don't remember like what the hertz were or anything.
Because I can hear that. People think it's fucking weird.
Right. Okay. So maybe there's something to it. Someone could still do a study. Yeah. So anyways, I went into his office, and I wanted to, I guess... give him, I don't know, I was presenting the opportunity of maybe we could do this study together and publish it, because it's quite expensive to get an IRB independently and then publish something. But when you're part of a university, they have their own IRB board, and you have to do that in order to publish any sort of human data from an experimental design.
What is IRB?
IRB is like internal review board or something. I forget what the I stands for, but basically they make sure that the research is ethical. So if you're doing any research with human beings, you are required to have IRB approval in order to publish it. So I took this study to him and, wanted to see if he was interested. And we didn't end up doing that study, but we've kind of connected after that and talked a little bit about psychedelics. And then I ended up working in his lab on fruit flies, feeding them genetically modified yeast that had sphingolipids in it. They were obese fruit flies, and I had to cut their heads off. That's another story.
Oh, wow.
But him and I actually kind of became friends, and so we never did the study. But
obese fruit flies. I'm gonna dwell on that for a while.
Yeah, they were genetically modified to become obese.
Could they fly?
I assume so. I mean, to be honest, I didn't really watch them all day.
I mean, I wonder if they got too heavy to fly.
Their little container was small, so they certainly didn't fly far.
Okay, all right, got it. But you cut their house. Got it. Okay, so continue. So you and him bond, you guys are working together.
So that was just one professor. And actually, I took a plant systematics class my last semester, and I would talk quite a bit about things like peyote and psychedelic plants with my professor, and he was pretty cool about that. And I ended up doing a report on the deadly nightshade family, like Datura and Brugmansia. I don't know if any of you or the listeners are familiar with those plants.
Tell us about them in a couple sentences. The deadly nightshade family?
The nightshade family, very intriguing family of plants, very toxic. Some of them are hallucinogenic. I don't recommend that anyone does them. Okay. That's all you need to know, I guess. So.
Do they do any of that in the teachings of Don Juan?
Yeah, they certainly. I mean, with a shaman who really knew what they were doing, there is certainly shamanic place as a medicine or as a divination tool, but I don't need to find out what that's like. It's not worth it because it's highly toxic. People do die, and I hear it's a really unpleasant experience. So.
Yeah, there's definitely been certain substances that people have told me about that are and then this happens and this happens. I'm like, why would you fucking do that? None of that sounds attractive at all. Right. Nobody's been able to sell, I want to accidentally say spice, not spice, salvia.
Oh, right.
Everyone who's ever told me about their salvia experience, I'm like, why? I don't understand why anybody would do that.
That's probably why it's legal. They're like, well, we don't have to worry about that. Yeah. No one likes that shit.
No idiot wants to do this shit.
Yeah, that's another interesting one.
Have you experienced salvia?
I did, but I was 18 years old. It was my 18th birthday. I'd never done a psychedelic. I had done MDMA once. You started with salvia? Yeah, I was like, salvia, that sounds like a fun thing to do on my 18th birthday. It gave me a lot of anxiety, and it was weird, and it might be interesting now that I've kind of have more practice journeying. Yeah. But I don't know. It hasn't really called to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you finished college. What's going on then in your life?
So before I had even finished college, I was really making headway figuring out my depression and my health issues, and I was feeling better. And I decided I really wanted to start a nutritional supplement company and make supplements for depression and anxiety, because I was like, why doesn't my doctor know about all the scientific literature on how, B vitamins, are really crucial for making neurotransmitters and doing all these other things, and how magnesium is also a cofactor for this. And I'm like, how come nobody knows this shit? I don't get it.
Do they know it, or just was it not financially... I don't know, it wasn't making enough money for the bigger companies to go after them?
I think that's probably the bigger reason why nobody's bothering to let the doctors know. But at the end of the day, doctors don't have time to read the literature. Very few of them actually read current scientific medical literature. So there is this gap between science and even medical journals and stuff, and medical practice, which is unfortunate. It's a 20-year gap.
Yeah.
So
because there's this whole bureaucracy to navigate, and there's different people with different agendas and different investments.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. It's you can't patent a nutrient unless you modify some molecule, out of a plant. It is possible to really make money in the nutraceutical industry, but that's not that doesn't work with the same model that the pharmaceuticals are going on. Right. So yeah, I wanted to start this supplement company because I felt like this was in information, and it was a tool that a lot of people didn't know was available or was going to even be helpful. And so basically I was waiting to graduate, and I graduated in December, so I gave myself 2 weeks for the holidays, and then January 2nd, bam, had an LLC and started my business, got like a $20,000 loan, and launched my first product in April of 2014.
Right after college. That's
yeah,
impressive.
like literally 2 weeks after I graduated, I started the LLC and put in the order to buy the first round of supplements.
Because I feel like that's not like a common thing with people that graduate in the sciences to immediately get into business.
I don't know why. I've always kind of had an entrepreneurial streak to me. And, because of my chronic health condition, I felt like I wouldn't survive a 9-to-5 structure because I needed to sleep 12 hours a freaking day. And like, I didn't have the resiliency and the strength of like a healthy human being. And so I kind of got good at rearranging my life and altering my lifestyle to cater to my physical limitations. Right. And so I think subconsciously
in the background. My ad, shut up.
Subconsciously, I knew that I was going to have to just be in control of my schedule in order to have any chance of thriving.
Much of the traumas from our youth make us exactly who we are. As adults, like the things that were such hindrances to us in our upbringing, like when we become grown-ups, and I'm saying that in quotes, right. It's personality. It's who we become as a reaction to like our own weaknesses that make us the unique.
It's an adaptation for sure. Yeah, totally.
It's amazing. So you start the company. So then I was a business person then, and I didn't know shit about business. Like, but I had always been starting little businesses as a kid. Like, this is actually kind of a random thing that we probably shouldn't go into too much detail about. But when I was 14, I sold hand-drawn custom horse portraits out at the barn so that I could raise money to castrate my donkey. I had a pet donkey. Yeah, so like I said, you probably don't want to go into that, but like I owned horses and I had a pet donkey. Yeah. And I would scrub dirty water buckets. And then when I was 18, I started right after high school, I started a horse training business. So pretty much from the beginning, like I'd only been employed twice in my whole life. Once I worked at the racetrack I cooled down and warmed up the race horses when I was 17. And then for a year I worked at a neurofeedback clinic. But that was just too hard on me. I couldn't get up and sit in traffic every day. It was like my health deteriorated pretty fast. So I'm an entrepreneur because I have to be. Right. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so how'd the business go? Tell me.
Well, so it's been 3.5 years now, and Jesus, it's been, had I known now what the process would have been like, I might have not gone forward with it, but now I'm really grateful. It's been a wild ride. And the fact that my business is actually profitable now, I haven't quite started paying myself money because I'm taking the profits to kind of grow my working capital and buy bigger batches so that my price gets lower and I have more of a margin and stuff. But I'm very close to being able to pay myself at least something, which to me is a mark of success,
Absolutely.
But man, it's been a struggle. Like the combination of working full time for free and having a health condition that really has limited my ability to work, has been very challenging. And I have come up with so many creative hustles just to stay alive. And there's been a lot of kindness and support from my community and my friends and my family. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have survived. But here I am, and I feel like I'm really close to tasting the fruit of my labor. And I'm really excited that, the company... I have a mood enhancement and stress support product now, which is my best seller. And I'm selling, over $5,000 on Amazon every month, which I think is I'm pretty proud of that, to take, it's a one-woman circus. And even though I've had people help me along the way, I have absolutely done everything myself. And I have been, I built my website, and then I've set up the Amazon page, and then I ship everything out, and then I make the art, and I print the brochures, and like I've literally done everything and worn all sorts of weird hats and had to learn all sorts of skills. And it's been a learning curve, but man, I feel like I know so much more about business. I know so much more about WordPress and Photoshop and Amazon and SEO and influencer marketing and social media. And like, I've gained a lot of skill and education from the struggle of it all.
Right. I mean, that's pretty much the only way to do it, though.
Yeah. I mean, they're not joking when they say you have to fail over and over and over. And persistence is really what makes someone succeed. It's like you have to be stubborn and just keep going, even when it makes no sense.
Well, an expert is simply one who has failed in every possible way in a very narrow field.
Yeah, I like that.
Burner Podcast.
Hey guys, real quick break. Just wanted to check in and let you guys know that we are hoping to expand on some of the content on the show to really give you like a full rounded burn kind of experience on every episode. So if you are one of our listeners in various parts of the world, in any other city or country that you might be in, if you're working on a project that you want to make announcements on, if there's some sort of large art project that you want to maybe raise money for, or there's some sort of like community outreach that you're doing, shoot us a message. We want to help you out. If it's something that kind of follows the Burning Man ethos, it would be wonderful to hear from you. We're looking to collect some 3 to 5 minute recordings that we can include on the show, so it'll give you even a more international feel to the Burner Podcast that you already love or kind of tolerate. But that's it. Let's get back to the show.
Welcome home.
So what were some of the things, like when you're looking at coming up with your products, I'm assuming you're looking at your own experiences and experiences of people around you in like festival culture, and you're seeing where that sort of need is for, how people can recover, how people can keep healthy neurotoxicity levels, et cetera, so that we can go out and do more drugs. So what were some of the gaps that you were observing and the needs out there that inspired some of your products?
Yeah. So, the first product that I launched the company with was the Party Recovery Supplement, Weekend Warrior. And, I've been... EntheoZen from the beginning has kind of been this attempt for me to marry my passions of psychedelics and brain and mood health, utilizing nutrition, And so I was just determined to find a way to make those relevant to each other. So I was really excited about the idea of making this party recovery substance because, harm reduction has become a big thing now, and it's getting bigger, and it's such an important part of taking care of people that are going to be using drugs, because you know what, it's going to happen. People do it, whether it's legal or not, whether it's safe or not. And some of the harm reduction tactics that we have is like Dance Safe offers drug testing and stuff like that, and a lot of it's about like keeping people from dying, which is great. That's really great. But I thought, what if we could like step it up and like do something even better, like keep people from feeling shitty, and like mitigate even the little bit of setback that occurs. Like maybe people are not ruining their lives, or maybe they're not taking dangerous drug combinations that they're going to die from, but maybe it's just still a little hard for them to get back to school or work on Monday. And I would like them to burn long, not fast, And so I thought, if I was able to provide a product that could replenish a lot of the depleted nutrients and minerals and provide the raw building blocks and ingredients for the body to make more neurotransmitters and to reduce the oxidative damage that's happening from these free radical compounds, or, just replenish the vitamins and minerals that play a really crucial part in cell repair and function, or neurotransmitter synthesis. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of how I got inspired by all that. Is just like, how can we party smarter and better and healthier?
Right. What if you had to recommend a substance that you find seems to have the least amount of like damage that it causes to people's experiences, people's brains afterwards, which one would you say it is from your opinion?
I would say the psychedelics for sure are the
whole
most.
Family?
Yeah, I mean,
You won't pick like mushrooms over LSD?
Well, mushrooms, I would say, just because LSD does put stress on the body. It lasts so long and it has a little more of a stimulant effect, which whether it's caffeine or LSD, a stimulant will kind of burn off some energy, and there is a bit of collateral damage from just being up all night. Mushrooms don't seem
because mushrooms, right after the trip's over, you sleep like a baby and you
they don't burn the flame as hot, you know. And
why is that? What is it about LSD that does that mushrooms doesn't?
So LSD has a lot of dopamine binding qualities, and is it adenosine or adrenaline? Probably both, but it does cause a release of adrenaline and these very stimulating stress hormones. And so that can kind of be rough on the adrenals. Yeah. Whereas mushrooms, it just doesn't seem to put as much stress on the body, energetically speaking. But I find that some people have more of a risk of having a psychological event happen on mushrooms. It really depends on the person. Some people say, oh man, I'm terrified on LSD, but mushrooms are my thing. Other people say, I don't do mushrooms at festivals because they're too dark and weird. Yeah. Everyone's brain chemistry is so different, and the environment plays a lot into it. So strictly talking about physiological, setback, I would say that mushrooms are probably the least draining of anything.
Right. Because also, that's interesting, because like with LSD, you're right, like even after like the trip is like technically over, your brain is still firing off on all cylinders, like, fuck sleep.
Yeah. And all those neurons firing, like that is burning through a lot of energy, and you're burning through your antioxidants, you're burning through your neurotransmitters. So whether or not the LSD is actually toxic or not, which it isn't, by the way, listeners, it's not toxic. There is an element of toxicity just from the oxidative stress that happens from staying awake and using your brain a lot.
Yeah, and your immune system is weakened, and then you're doing other things throughout that experience. You're probably drinking, you're staying up all night.
Yeah, but one could argue the same of caffeine, honestly. Right. It's like if you drink a shit ton of coffee to get through your day because you didn't sleep the night before, that's probably just as detrimental as if you take LSD and push through the day,
Yeah, because most of us can't do that because we have the job that we have to go to. But like it is, if you're having that experience where you're like fighting just to stay awake and you're going through that much caffeine to do it, probably is better just to go the fuck to sleep.
Yeah, it's just hard on the adrenals. You're shocking your body into this flight or fight stress response to convince it that it needs to stay awake because there's something very crucial, and dangerous around.
Do you have any knowledge on what is happening in the brain if you're doing like one hit of LSD versus 4, and why is it that with 4 you're losing grip of reality completely? Yeah,
I don't, and I think as we explore more about microdosing, we'll have some insight into dose dependent effects, because certainly in pharmaceutical drugs, dose matters. Like you will see a drug actually have different pharmacological behavior based on the dose. Right. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was something like that with LSD. I know with the MDMA trials they've done, this isn't necessarily looking at the pharmacology, but as far as the psychological metrics, they know that, a really low dose of MDMA or like a higher dose, they're both really good for a therapeutic outcome. But the middle dose kind of gives them anxiety, but doesn't cause the fear extinction that's important for the actual resolving of the PTSD or reliving the experience. So in that situation, like dose really is crucial. And I believe that's probably the case for a lot of substances.
Right. I feel like I've seen this a lot in the rave scene, especially with, especially like younger MDMA users. It'll like stop working because who knows, like if they've like depleted their just their reserves and everything, so they just like keep trying to take more, and it just gets dark and even more depressing. What's happening in the brain when you're continuing to take MDMA or I don't know, MDA? Is that still the same kind of thing that's happening?
Yeah, fairly similar.
If you're continuing to take it after nothing's happening.
So there's a few things that come to mind that could potentially be factors in that. Of course, eventually, you're probably not going to be at full abundance of serotonin supply like you were the first time you took it. And so, over time, it's like if you're doing it more than every 3 months, then you're likely not completely restoring that level of serotonin. Also,
is it taking longer for your serotonin to reload the more often you do it?
It could. I can't say that for sure. But also, with repeated binding to receptors, there are epigenetic of gene effects. And so say you have serotonin binding to something over and over, it can actually change the expression of those receptor proteins. And so that it could alter how many of those receptors your body is creating or repairing on a regular basis. And that could alter how many are actually available to be bound to. And also, if someone is taking a lot of drugs or alcohol on a regular basis, a lot of times the liver will adapt and upregulate the production of the enzymes that will degrade those substances, because it goes, oh shit, there's always this, especially drinkers, you see this, they have elevated liver enzymes because their liver is constantly trying to cope with the toxic substance that's being put in it on a regular basis, and it's trying to protect the body and break it down. So like, we need more army men, and so if you have elevated liver enzymes, you're going to have a higher tolerance, and you're going to need more because your body's just trying to do you a favor and metabolize it as fast as possible and spare you the toxic effects. But then you end up, with a reduced effect from the drug.
Right. I have a lot of weird questions. What is happening in situations where people take, and I've never seen this really happen, I guess, with acid, but with ecstasy for sure, MDMA, where people take it and it just nothing's kicking in, and they're walking around saying, what's going on? Do I need to take more? And they haven't even done anything earlier days, anything the day before, right. But their body's just for some reason not kicking in. And different people have different tricks on how to get theirs to kick in. Some people will go smoke a cigarette. Yeah. Some people have a drink. They're like, oh, let's go get it a different environment, listen to different music. Right. Have you had any experiences like that? Yeah. It's hard to say why that is. It could be that the gut is not absorbing. If you took it orally, the gut's not absorbing it well, or perhaps a food that you ate earlier in the day that's still in the gut could be interacting with that molecule and changing it somehow, or out competing it, or there's just so many things happening in the human body. And also sometimes, I've certainly seen this with LSD, there's all these different isomers, and there's slightly different just combinations of end products, or different purities and different chiralities to the molecule. Are they right-handed or left-handed version of the molecule? And that can interact with the uniqueness of a person's physiology and the receptors that they have, because you and I might have different formula for a serotonin receptor, where you have a tryptophan or I guess that's amino acid, where you have a lysine or something. I could have some polymorphism where that's I have a different amino acid there, and so our serotonin binds slightly different to our receptors. And that's all genetic and epigenetic, and the foods you eat and the drugs you take can alter that gene expression. And there's so many moving parts, and the body is so dynamic. It's who the fuck knows why? Honestly, the only reason I can really give is that there is a lot of variation in drug quality, because they're not all coming out of a factory with GMP analysis to make sure they're all identical, pure. And our human bodies are respond to everything so different, even day to day. Even the same person's body can respond so different just based off the meal that you ate that day. Right. It's a whole ecosystem that we're navigating.
Oh, yeah. It's like this fluctuating thing, you know?
What were you saying about the right and left-handed molecule?
So, yeah, there's something called chirality in organic chemistry. And so ketamine's a good example of this. So, you know, you have a molecule, and there can be two versions of the same molecule. Just like my hand, they're the same thing, right? They're exactly the same structure, but they're mirror images of each other. If I try to impose them on top of each other, they do not overlap because they're opposites. So ketamine, a lot of times, you know, you can get the R isomer, which, you know, say that's the right hand version. And that binds to the, you know, NMDA glutamate receptor a certain way. And then other times you can get the S isomer, which is the exact same shape, but just reversed. And that binds slightly different into that receptor. And so they have slightly different results.
Yeah.
Like one's a little bit more sedative and the other is a little bit more psychedelic and energized, you know?
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've had experiences, it's safe to say, with a variety of different substances.
Me?
Field research.
Yeah, field research, yeah.
Is there a substance that you've experienced that maybe is not like one of the more popular ones that you would guess if more people knew about would become more popular? Like one that like pops into my mind is experiences that I've had with mescaline.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like a small percentage of people I've observed will get like very sick off of it.
Right.
And then usually it gets better. But yeah, it seems to be something in the middle of Molly and mushrooms for most people.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a light, pleasant background kind of thing. And it's not very heady.
It's subtle.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a little vanilla when it comes to taking substances. I'm actually not
necessarily like stuff you've taken, just observations.
Observations. You know, I'm a bit skeptical of a lot of the research chemicals, so I haven't tried all these weird, you know, 2C compounds, or the synthetic analogs. I've kind of just stuck with the tried and true personally, because I'm like, oh, I know that people have taken, you know, ayahuasca and mescaline and LSD for a really long time, and it seems to be pretty cool, you know?
Right.
One thing that was...
But the stuff that only... what was his name? Sasha? Was it?
Yeah, Sasha Shulgin.
It's like only him and his wife took it and nobody else has, and we don't have enough stories about it.
Yeah. One thing that I think is really not a common experience, or that people don't even realize is a thing, in Ecuador, I did this ceremony called Natu Mamu. And in Ecuador, in the Shuar tradition, ayahuasca is called Natem. And so Natu Mamu is this ceremony where you consume just the vine. There's no chacruna, which means there's no DMT additive. Now, I've actually seen books by shamans and stuff who are medical doctors and stuff say that ayahuasca vine on its own doesn't have psychoactive properties. That is bullshit. That is not true. And I have experienced it firsthand. And that whole ceremony was quite... I call it the Shuar frat party because it's basically you binge drink this ayahuasca vine brew. And, you know, when you drink ayahuasca as the combined tea, it's like a thick syrup that you drink about a shot glass worth of material. And when you do Natu Mamu, you are drinking between like 7 to 20 liters of this fluid. And so in the situation I was in doing it, we were, you know, deep in the jungle in Ecuador, and everybody lines up on the edge of the jungle. We have no buckets or any of that bullshit. We just barf into the jungle, and the jungle eats it, you know, in an hour practically. And there were 4 giant vats. We had cooked our medicine. We cooked our medicine every day as part of, you know, our experience. And there were about 25 of us. And the drinking part of the ceremony ends when all of it is gone. So there was like 4, I'm not even sure, maybe 10-gallon vats of this Natu Mamu brew. and you have a bowl and it holds about half a liter, and there are 5 helpers, and their job is to fill up your bowl and yell at you to keep drinking, because otherwise you will not force yourself to keep drinking. It's like you need that external pressure. And the first few bowls
it totally sounds like a frat party. I can tell you as a frat guy. We've absolutely done that. The
first few bowls are all right, you know, like you get like 3 or 4 of them down, and then you start purging, and then you get to the point where you're just alternating guzzling this liquid and vomiting, and you probably vomit like, I don't know, like 70 times in one ceremony. Yeah. And then you get to the point and they're yelling, you know, mate, 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 which is a Shuar word for drink. Yeah. And you're starting to get really high, really fast. And I'm sitting there with my bowl, my hands are shaking, and I'm looking into the jungle, and I'm seeing sound waves reverberate across plants and shit. And I'm like crying because I'm like, I fucking hate this. I don't want to keep drinking. At points I would like hold the thing up to my face and just hold it there and not drink, just so they would not pour anymore or yell at me to keep drinking. And then you get to a point eventually where you're so high that you can't stand up anymore. So they bring you a chair and keep filling your bowl and yell at you. It's gnarly. It's so gnarly. And then once it's all done, they ring the gong. You know, everybody's drank, everybody's fucked up, and then the helpers help walk you to your bed, and you lay there and have a 5-hour ceremony. And you'll continue to purge quite painfully for the next like 2 hours or so. And it was really interesting to have that experience without the chacruna involved, because it was actually quite like ecstasy in a way. Like it had this warm, melty, euphoric feeling, like fuzzy. Whereas in ayahuasca, there's this distinct like sharpness to it, like you know, DMT spikes your cortisol, which is like your stress hormone, and so you're kind of like uncomfortable, you know. But this was way more like I could just melt away into the bed, and it felt very much like ecstasy. And
everybody reported similar experiences.
I can't say that for sure, but I did it 2 nights in a row, and that was my experience both nights. And the difference also between that and like, you know, ayahuasca with the DMT, you know, ayahuasca it's quite visionary because of the DMT, and I was able to tangibly kind of grab thoughts or concepts or visions and pull them back and keep it with me. Whereas with the Natu Mamu, with just the vine, it was more like I was receiving downloads, but I couldn't really consciously grasp onto them. And it didn't feel really much there wasn't a lot of third eye activity going on. It was like emotional downloads and stuff kind of moving through the heart center and less through the third eye. And there was still healing occurring, but it was like I wasn't able to actually be intellectually or consciously aware of it and really grab onto thoughts or concepts that I could apply in my waking state.
You could like walk away and say, this is what I learned. This is a revelation that I had.
Yeah, it was hard to grasp onto things, but
So what is the value of the experience? Are the downloads like still happening, but you just can't describe them?
Yeah, I think so. So. You feel like there's healing going on, but it feels like it's happening in your heart rather than in your like psyche, you know?
Right.
Yeah. It's very unique.
Wow. When did you get into working with the combo frog?
I would say about 2.5 years ago. Actually, my good friend Edward, good friend Edward.
Previous
he did
on the show.
Yeah, I highly suggest anyone listen to that podcast. So he was a friend from the ayahuasca community, and he told me about that he'd been getting real deep into this frog medicine. And I'd heard of it. You know, I traveled to the jungle several times and heard it in passing, but it never occurred to me that might be something that I want to do.
Right.
And then Edward kind of told me more about it, and he took me to my first Kambo ceremony, and instantly I knew that was a medicine for me. Like I got so much out of one single treatment, which isn't always common. I feel like sometimes people need repetitive treatments to kind of break through. But it was so powerful for me the first time. And I continued to do the series, you know. And
what was it about it that spoke to you the most?
It seemed to be one of the most important factors in my healing process from Lyme disease. And it addressed so many physical things like pain, inflammation, these infections from Lyme and other organisms. But there is a really bizarre metaphysical aspect to that medicine, and it's so hard to describe. And I really would say it is mind expansive, but not in the same way that a psychedelic is. And of course, it's not, hallucinogenic like a psychedelic, but it has a similar style of this mind expansive property, but it's so unique to anything I've ever stumbled across. And it's seems to like weave itself into the fabric of time and space and the physical environment. I see the frog medicine work in so many ways on actually kind of manipulating physical reality, which sounds crazy to think that you could take a substance that's, very physical. You barf it. It has all these scientifically studied attributes to it, but somehow it seems to engage in the universe in some way that is related to you. It's very bizarre.
It's interesting. Yeah, people kept asking me, because I finally went and had the experience. When I interviewed Edward, I hadn't actually done it yet.
Oh.
And then I ended up doing it because I had my first ayahuasca experience, and then within a month, I felt like very strongly called to Kambo. Oh,
they're good friends for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and because I didn't purge in my ayahuasca experience, and I feel like some stuff was left over, and Kambo like took care of it.
Yeah. They only purge with that.
yeah. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like people kept asking me, they're like, "Oh, you did this thing. How was it?" And I'm like, fucking awful. Like it's a horrible experience. Your insides are trying to crawl out from you, from your mouth and from your ass and from whatever other orifice it can get a hold of.
Right.
And then once like some of it comes out, you're like, you need more of it to come out. But then afterwards, you feel like a fucking $1,000,000.
Yeah.
And I haven't felt called to go back and do it again yet.
Yeah.
I'm not to say that I'm not going to.
Sure.
But I wonder, like, when you're having this experience, you're a psychonaut. That's definitely like the description there. You've had a lot of these other like more psychoactive experiences, psychedelics, like things that are visionary in experience. But Kambo isn't necessarily. It's not like you're not tripping.
Right.
You're not seeing things, but it spoke to you. And I'm wondering like what conversation was being had in your head from that.
It had been speaking to me for years, but I didn't know it yet. I'd had weird dreams about frogs that I distinctly remembered, had visions and ayahuasca ceremonies before I even knew anything about it. So I think the frog has been priming me. And I really do believe that my purpose in the reason I'm even, having to battle this illness, I believe, is because I have the ability to push through it and come out with this reservoir of information and resource to help other people that might not have had the ability to figure it out on their own. Maybe they didn't have a biology degree. Maybe they didn't have the support of an amazing community of friends or have the drive to figure it out. So I think that the frog was really kind of recruiting me, said, hey, I'll heal you if you work for me, And that's kind of what happened. Was it made such an impact on my own personal healing. And I, of course, was sharing my experience with a lot of people. And I tend to attract a lot of people with chronic health problems and autoimmune conditions. And they're like, they don't know what to do. Their doctors don't know what's wrong with them. And they don't know what food is right to eat, what diet they should eat. And it's like, there's a lot of information out there. And it's so hard to know what is the right thing to do. And so I've had a lot of people come to me for the Kambo because I am a practitioner now. And I really feel like everybody that's serving frog medicine has been recruited, and it's not actually their choice at all. I feel like the frog is so highly intelligent, and it really chooses its practitioners to act as a hollow vessel, and the frog just moves through and does the healing work, and we just hold that space and facilitate it.
Yeah. I have talked to a lot of different people on this show who have been called to a lot of different things, and that is one of the consistent things that I've experienced is that people feel a call to some sort of healing work. And then when they find the thing that's speaking to them, they give a lot of similar answers to like what you're giving right now, which is like this thing that makes them feel like, oh, this is the one. This is the thing. Yeah. Charles Johnson, for example, who's been on the show before, like the first time I interviewed him, it was all about ibogaine after But then once he started working with ayahuasca, he immediately was like, oh, no, wait, this is the thing that's been calling me.
Right.
It's really interesting to...
Yeah.
So that actually kind of like transitions to the next question that I wanted to ask you, which is, where are you personally with what we would refer to as spirituality? Is like when you're having these visionary experiences with plant medicine and with psychoactive substances, and you're a scientist, so you're definitely approaching it from this very like being able to dissect all the details of what's happening behind the scenes.
Right.
Is any of this connected to you with, I don't know, higher consciousness, God?
Oh God, yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because actually...
Because I just want to cut it, like if somebody was to listen to a lot of this conversation until this point, they might not have guessed that.
Right. Yeah, I'm a very spiritual scientist, actually. And I wasn't really raised religious or anything, but I've always been kind of energetically sensitive and attuned to the bigger picture. And when I was in college and studying science and using all these psychedelics simultaneously, I was kind of blown away at the secular attitude by all of my peers, because I was like learning about this shit and I'm like, how can anyone see how amazingly complex and intelligent biochemistry is and the history of life and how it's developed and not be blown away and think somebody intelligent is in charge of all this, or something. I don't, somebody implies that it's external. I think it is something that's embodied in every living molecule or everything, every bit of matter, I think, is embodying consciousness and this
it's
expansive.
It's not a guy in the sky. Yeah, it's like
right. Yeah. It's not external. Like
it's something.
We are it, and it is us. It is me right now expressing this, and I actually feel like the more I learn about the molecular kind of material world, the closer I am to God or the universe or the great consciousness, spirit, whatever the hell you want to call it. So I know that's not the case for a lot of other scientists, but for me, just like the more I learn about the reality of this world, the more I see how geniusly beautiful and executed it is. And it's like, I don't believe that it's random. I believe that there is some creative force that has an intention of continuing to create and has an affinity for building complexity. And I can't say that there's a purpose, because I actually don't. I think the purpose is just to be, to exist. Almost like art, like what's the purpose of art? Oh, to inspire, to entertain, or well, it's just to be. It's an expression, basically. And I do feel like that is kind of the purpose of life, is just to have to be any form of life, expressed as life.
Right. Your autoimmune disease challenges. Can you describe in a couple of sentences what an autoimmune disease is, or where it comes from? Like what do we know about where it comes from? Because it does seem like there's mystery around it. Sure.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of doctors treating people with autoimmune diseases haven't figured it out. But essentially, the definition of autoimmune is when your body's immune system starts to mistakenly attack healthy tissue and actually cause damage to it. Now, what actually causes that? A chronic stressor of some sort. So the stressor could be your shitty boss at work. It could be your abusive father in your childhood. It can be mold exposure that is putting physical stress on the body. It could be not sleeping enough because you're a student working full time and you're drinking lots of coffee. It could be that you actually have an allergy to dairy and you don't realize it, and you're stressing your body by putting this inflammatory immune reactive substance. And usually it's a combination of a lot of things. A lot of times you see there's
so many things that could be affecting it that finding the specific source is really fucking hard.
Yeah, in this day and age, there's so much toxicity in our air, in our food, in our water, in our pillows that we sleep on, in our cars, and there's a rise of infectious organisms. Lyme disease is becoming really prolific as climate change is shifting the environment. And we kind of live in a socially toxic environment. Like, people are so stressed out that, the economy is kind of shitty. There's a lot of people that feel like they don't have enough money to buy themselves the food or the rent or whatever they need. And so I really think that the rise in autoimmune illnesses that we're seeing, because about 30% of Americans have some sort of diagnosed autoimmune disease, and it's probably closer to 50% undiagnosed,
Right.
So I think there's a combination of stressors, chronic stressors on the body, and the body can hold the fort down for a long time pretty good, but usually there's something that will break or be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And a lot of times it's actually an emotional trigger or an infection of some sort. And so really there is a culmination of things. And a lot of times you see infectious organisms really taxing the body, or toxic exposure of some sort, or an emotional trauma, even as a child, that preset your nervous system in this chronic, stuck, sympathetic flight or fight response that downstream is going to compromise the body. It's going to make it more accessible to opportunistic organisms like Candida or Lyme or Epstein-Barr or herpes or whatever. And then you just got a lot of shit going on at that point.
Yeah. So the stressors are already in your system. You're more likely to be a comfortable environment for these last few that you described.
Because you're compromised.
Yeah.
You're compromised, and your body, it's like if there's fires all over Southern California, there's only so many firemen to put out the fires. They're going to go to the Beverly Hills houses first,
Yeah.
And so your body's doing its best, but after a while it gets tired and it can't pump out these immune cells anymore, and you become immunocompromised because it's we can't do this any longer, and there's a lot of shit starts going wrong at that point.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot to digest there. So you're back to sort of where you're at right now. You're in a much healthier place than you've ever been. Mm-hmm. You feel stronger than ever.
Yeah.
This has been as a result of this journey. For listeners who are having these kind of challenges, what is your advice? If you had to lay out a 5-step plan on what to do.
So I guess I'll just kind of briefly name some of the tools that, so first you have to eliminate foods or toxic exposure that are hurting you. Stop pouring gasoline on the fire. You have to usually completely rebuild the microbiome, which is the ecosystem of microorganisms that live in the gut. And I've had really good luck doing this with Cambo and antimicrobial herb regimens, in combination with, removing a lot of things from the diet, such as wheat, dairy, sometimes grains, sometimes carbohydrates altogether, like a ketogenic diet, nightshades, yeast. There's a lot of people are reactive to different things, but you have to target the foods that are hurting that individual, remove them from the diet, heal the gut, clear out, these microbial overgrowths or imbalances with herbs or Cambo, and actually rebuild the population in a much more balanced, diverse, sustainable way. Mm-hmm. And then I also found that a lot of times you have to retrain the nervous system, because the gut and the nervous system, they are in this two-way street communicating with each other. And what I've realized, both in my anecdotal experience, and it's actually quite well established in the scientific literature, a lot of people that develop these autoimmune problems or these gut problems have some sort of adversive childhood event or experience, and you can actually see correlates to how traumatic, how many traumatic events a person had as a child and their likelihood of being hospitalized for an autoimmune condition. And the way that I can explain that sort of physiologically is that the nervous system, it responds with this stress response, which is a very real physiological thing. We have stress hormones, and we shut down the immune system and the digestion because those aren't important when it's time to run from the lion. Putting blood and glucose to the muscles is what's important so that you can escape. But when it's chronic, your body isn't absorbing nutrients. The vagal nerve, which is really important for actually receiving sensory information from the body and then relaying it back down from the brain, that affects things like signals to the gut, and that will dictate the environment of the gut. What pH is it? When is it secreting gastric juices? What type of environment is the gut? And that influences what type of microbes live there. And they, have all sorts of implications in disease and health. They make neurotransmitters. They help us extract nutrients from food. They make B vitamins as byproducts. They convert neurotransmitters to other neurotransmitters. So the microbial population is actually really important for establishing brain and mood health. And the immune health as well, and inflammation, like everything. Like, honestly, if I had to say anything that would be the most important thing to address, it's the microbiome. Right. So not to go off too much on a tangent, my point was to illustrate why that's important. Right. So I would say clean up the gut and the microbiome with diet and herbs and possibly Kambo, frog medicine, and retrain the nervous system, because the nervous system is what's sending the signals down to the gut and causing the dysbiosis. Right. So it's important to clean up the gut, but if you clean it up and you don't address the underlying, sexual abuse as a child, or a traumatic event from, going to Afghanistan, or whatever it is that has traumatized you, the nervous system will continue to pull the rest of the body in a maladaptive state until it is corrected. So a lot of brain retraining, such as meditation, qigong, breath work, float tanks, neurofeedback training, really important. So I guess to summarize it all, the brain retraining technologies, diets and antimicrobial herbs, and then psychedelic medicines and Kambo have also been really important, because they're quite holistic, and they address the physical and the spiritual aspects of the causality of these things.
Yeah, hit it, mind, body, and soul.
Yeah,
go at it from every direction.
Yeah, because these are very complex illnesses, and that's part of the reason why Western medicine is failing, is like they're not really...
They fixate on one thing. Yeah,
they're not equipped with the skills to think in a complex, interrelated systems mentality, and that is why they're falling short at helping people with autoimmune conditions.
Right. And it's an interesting thing too, like I feel like the simplified version that you hear described anecdotally is when people describe people who have these kinds of conditions who seem to continue attracting more pain and trauma. Somehow it just shows up in their life more. Yeah. And to some extent it could be because their immune system is not able to fight it, and they're weak so that they can't focus on things, and then they get blindsided by experiences in life that make them worse. Oh yeah. I have somebody close to me, for example, who was in a traumatic car accident last year, and when I'm driving with this person, I notice that I feel like I'm attracting more almost car accidents.
Oh, interesting.
The trauma, the trauma's still there. She squeezes up. Then I think that increases the anxiety in the car, increases the anxiety in the driver. Yeah. And it's like this chain reaction effect that happens. And that, of course, is affecting her immune system. It just all keep bouncing back and forth,
this horrible feedback loop. And it's easy to get trapped in it, which I think is part of the reason it's so hard for people to recover. It's like you really have to have something shake it up.
Right. It crushes your confidence. I have another friend who's been, had autoimmune disease issues, and she's a cancer survivor, and it's become this thing where all of her friends around her, everybody's always like, I don't know what it is. If something really shitty is going to happen to one person in the group, it's going to be to her. She bit into a rock in her salad and ended up breaking a bunch of her teeth.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't know, it's anecdotal because there's so many variables as you're describing, but I wonder if her immune system was stronger, if you tick back, go back all the way to the beginning, all of her body was stronger, her system was stronger, maybe her mouth would have noticed the rock before she like chomped into it and it broke her teeth, you know?
Maybe. I don't know.
It's all giant maybes.
Yeah. Well, and something that I have kind of noticed and have the opinion on lately is the people with these autoimmune problems. I feel like we are actually burning off ancestral karma that doesn't belong to us. So we're carrying this burden and this load, and all this shitty stuff is like relentlessly happening. Like I definitely feel like that's kind of my life lately. Yeah. Just like it never stops. I'm like, fuck, when are things just gonna be chill and good and like easy? But I really do feel like we are metabolizing and digesting this ancestral karma that has been just like accumulated over the years. And you know, we're at a very crucial point in history where the future of our species is at hand. And if we don't heal ourselves, which is really fundamental to healing the world, like we aren't gonna make it. Yeah. And so I think that this, on a spiritual level, this seems like some really just like the universe is helping us do the work. We are unraveling all the bullshit from all the people before us, and we are making a really distinct shift right now in consciousness and human evolution. And so I would like to think that our suffering is not in vain. Right. And I feel like a lot of people have a similar experience, and they feel that there's a bigger purpose to their suffering and their struggle. And I don't know how else to describe it. There's something else going on.
No, I get it. I mean, I think I forget what number episode this is going to be. This might be 69.
Ooh, yeah.
So, no, and that's, for me, like, that's been the thing about the Burning Man community, is that we're very much like at the cutting edge of experimentation with all of these things. And it is this approach where, like, these are the kind of conversations that happen where we are looking at our own karmic energy, but then we're also like describing it from a scientific angle. Like, you and I have had conversations about polyamory. Like it's all at the cutting edge of every experience. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the conversations that are being had here are at the forefront of what's going to happen next in human civilization. Yeah. So just even the simple fact that we're here having this conversation, and this is part of a running series of conversations, gives me some hope, at least. Yeah. That we're working together to figure out what to do next.
Well, one thing that I find really interesting is, so we've seen this really quite rapid rise of autoimmune conditions in the last few years. And I look at the state of the earth, and, there's this concept of a fractal, and there's these like micro and macrocosms that are reflections of the same pattern, the same sequence and algorithm at different levels of size, I guess. And I look at what's going on with the physical earth, and I look at what's going on in our bodies. And, I think of human beings as like a candida overgrowth of the earth that has caused an autoimmune condition. And the earth, it's physically heating up. It's like, I know that climate change is more complicated than that, but, global warming, to me, that's like the earth has chronic systemic inflammation and is representing the same expressions energetically as these autoimmune conditions in our body. Right. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And so I in part feel like part of healing our physical autoimmune problems is actually going to maybe make a difference in healing the collective earth. Because I do feel like, in the same way that our microbiome, it's all these different organisms, and it really begs the question of what is the self? Like, right. How much of me is really me? I'm actually only 10% of me, human being, and that makes me feel more like a colony organism, which it invites just questions about, well, could the earth have a similar phenomenon where the collection of these different organisms that live in an ecosystem, just like the microbiome, could actually produce one single consciousness and sense of self. Right. And I just see these interesting patterns reflecting in many different areas. And
it seems like the more psychedelics we do, the more those patterns become clear to us. Mm-hmm. I hope it's not that we're just going ape shit, but bad shit. But no, it's like Alan Watts describes. You think you live on the earth, but you're actually from the earth because, try leaving.
Yeah.
Gravity pulls you right back down.
Right.
It's the example of like the fingers on the hand. Like each finger is its own thing, but it's all part of the hand. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So if we're all of the earth, we're all part of that same connection. Worst case scenario, if listeners are listening to this part and going, oh, okay, they just went off the deep end, which I love, by the way. Worst case scenario, if that's the case, I would say it's still, from that angle, an interesting thought game, if you will, and a way to approach thinking about how to solve some of humanity's problems from that angle.
Sure.
You know? So
it's unifying.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So like what you're describing, like looking at the earth as an immune, as if it has its own immunity disease. Yeah. That might inspire some new ways of approaching solving some of the challenges that we're experiencing as a humanity, as a species living on this planet.
Yeah, I mean, we're fighting with each other, and really, we're all humans, we're all earthlings, and it's kind of like autoimmune. It's like parts of yourself are attacking parts of yourself.
Totally.
And I just see it so much just expressed in humanity and the cultures and the wars and the devastation to nature for just trying to have resources, and we don't realize that nature is the resource.
Right. This pattern that you're describing, like seeing the patterns in reality, because I feel the same way. I'm sure a lot of people we've spoken with have had similar experiences. Like we keep seeing these consistent patterns throughout reality, the way that a human being operates, the way that the earth operates, the way that cultures
circles
operate. Yeah, like we keep seeing this consistent, the golden ratio, if you will.
Yeah.
Is that something that you were on some level aware of before psychedelics? Or did the ideas get introduced to you after discovering?
I'm sure, in my high school biology course, that I know, the Fibonacci sequence is kind of mentioned, but I guess I never really felt a sacred connection with it. Right. And now I see it as the programming, of life.
Now it's how do you not see it? You can't unsee it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's awesome. Well, what's next for you and your company and your plans? And
so I'm coming out with a new product in hopefully early 2018. It's in the works. It's formulated. It's quoted. It's just a matter of executing it now. It is a psychobiotic. So what that means is it's a probiotic product specifically designed for brain and mood health. Huh. So it's to help with depression and anxiety. And I picked all these very specific species of probiotics that have been studied to show some sort of positive effect on mood or resiliency to stress, in rat studies, or to actually encourage serotonin and dopamine production or regulate HPA, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. So there's a fair amount of really solid research behind it. And it also, I'm incorporating these bacteriophages in it. It's this cutting edge probiotic enhancing therapy, I guess, where you put these specific strains of bacteriophages are basically viruses that target bacteria only, not humans, and they are geared for specific strains of E. coli that are known to inhibit the growth of commensal or good gut bacteria. And the rat studies they've done show that they augment the colonization of the probiotics by 40-fold. Okay. So I'm really excited about it. And I think it's going to be a really cutting edge, kick-ass product. And I assume it's going to be very effective because the Transcend's quite effective. That's the mood enhancement I have now. So I'm excited about that product. And then, as I kind of shift out of the festival culture with the company a little bit and focus more on the mood stuff, I am hoping to somehow incorporate EntheoZen into actually creating scientific research. I don't know how that will look yet. I don't know that's certainly something that I personally am seeking right now, is trying to put together experimental designs in a team to execute them and publish research. And I specifically want to look at things like inflammation or immune response or depression or microbiome, because all those things, as you can see now, are related. Right. So kind of doesn't matter to me which thing I look at first, but I just want to contribute to understanding any of those things that are relevant to quality of life. And I would like to use either Cambo or psychedelic to look at those things in humans. Right. So hopefully EntheoZen can at least like sponsor at some point, or I don't know how it's all gonna fit in moving forward, but I am wanting to go more of a scientific contribution with the company and continue to create content that's gonna empower people and educate them, because while I would love for them to buy my supplements and it'd be nice to pay my rent with my business soon, really I want people to change their diet and their lifestyle and all the important things that they really need to be healed and healthy and happy, because my supplement is not going to cure anybody. It's not going to solve the problem. It's going to mitigate their discomfort until they get to the root of it, which could be that they're allergic to wheat or they have a chronic infection. So I want to provide tools both in the form of products and educational platform so that people can just be healthier and happier.
Right. You need to start a podcast.
My boyfriend wants to start a podcast with me. I said, as long as you edit everything and I just show up and talk, then we're good. No,
it's a thing that needs to be done. Like, because I think like just even a lot of what you're describing, like I'm kind of keeping up because I've been through one hell of a fucking journey, like getting my body to where it is today. It's listeners on the show have heard me bitch quite a bit about all the places I've come from, but just a lot of the challenges that I've had, like mental health, physical health, weight loss, like all of this, it's been a journey. Mm-hmm. And trying to describe it to people, like about how complex it was. Yeah. Because people, like a lot of people really want, like, oh, what diet do I get on? Just tell me the diet. And I'll do that. And it's not that simple. It's the experience that I've had. There's so many things involved, mind, body, and soul. Right. And we are a rich ecosystem of experiences, and our bodies, like you said, we're 10% of it is like the human personality that we're interacting with. Right. The rest of it is tons of other organisms. Yeah. So to be able to explain that, and I feel like, creating like a structured, you're writing a book, you're starting a podcast, you're going to have to get this message out there and tell
and segment it into chapters or episodes. Because you're right. It's like,
this has been a for dummies version.
And it is hard. And I try really hard to summarize it in a way that's as concise as possible, yet complete. Yeah. But I've run into that problem consistently when I'm giving lectures on autoimmune conditions. I'm like spouting out all the information as simplified as I possibly can. And people are still like, what the fuck did you just say? So it would be nice to segment it, but I don't know. For me, it's just like, it's all so interrelated. And so you almost have to mention everything simultaneously to see the bigger picture.
Oh, I get it. All right, well, we'll figure it out.
That's why you can re-listen to the podcast, and then Google is your friend.
And then how can people contact you if they have questions?
So probably the best way would be to go through my website, my EntheoZen website. So it's www.entheozen.com, and it's spelled EntheoZen, EntheoZen. It's like the word entheogen, like as in a psychedelic compound. EntheoZen.com. And, you can email me on there, or you can contact me through the Facebook page. And like, really, I invite you, if you want to ask me a question or just say, hey, I listened to your podcast and I enjoyed it. Like any sort of interaction, I really enjoy getting. So feel free to reach out for any reason. Also, if you want to ask me about Cambo or anything like that, there's links on EntheoZen to my Cambo website. Or you could just type in Cambo San Diego. I got that shit on lock. Yeah. My boyfriend does SEO, so Yeah, there's a lot of ways to find me.
Yeah. I mean, I encourage people to like message me to tell me to fuck off.
Yeah, if you think that I'm just like a dumb bitch, feel free to let me know. Keep me humble, you know.
You can dig it. Thanks so much for coming on. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's been a fun conversation.
Thank you for all the work that you do. You're fucking awesome, and I really, really do hope that you start a podcast because you're not gonna run out of shit to talk about.
You'll be my first guest. How about that?
For sure. Yeah. And I'll just come interview again.
Cool.
You are hearing Igor Mediwan's Sunrise set from Playground at Burning Man 2017 in the background right now. We're going to play the first hour of it. If you want to hear the rest, which you probably must because it's fucking awesome, you can visit his SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Igor Mediwan. And it is spelled, his name, Igor Mediwan, is spelled IGORMARIJUAN. Igor Mediwan. It's like marijuana, but only Mediwan. I love this set. Super happy we get to play it and happy that he gave us his support. Please give us a like on Facebook and join the group. I'd love to see some more discussions happening over there. And leave us a review on iTunes. It helps get the show more visibility and more of our tribe can find the show and be a part of this conversation. All the links to all that shit is over at burnerpodcast.com. You can connect with me directly on all the social medias at Mr. Arash. That's MRARASH. I am most active on Facebook and Instagram, but you can tweet me and stuff too. And every once in a while I Snapchat some personal diary shit. Burner Podcast is released on the first and third Wednesdays of the month and is available on Stitcher, iTunes, Spreaker, iHeart Radio, and TuneIn Radio, among many others. The show is not hard to find. This episode is produced by myself, Arash Afshar, and associate producer Tori Massey. We thank you so much, dear listeners, for all of your support. Our opening theme music, America's Horse with No Name Remix, is produced by Joman. Check out his music over at soundcloud.com/DJ Joman. So until next time, love and light and all that other crap. Take us out, Igor Mediwan. Good night.
burnerpodcast.com.